Alan Walsh leaned over the side of the research vessel, watching the dark Atlantic waters ripple below. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. As the marine biologist, he often worked late, long after the others had gone to sleep. Tonight, something about the ocean felt different, an unusual stillness that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He checked his equipment one last time before heading below deck. The water samples had shown some anomalies, microscopic organisms that shouldn't be in these waters. It was exciting, potentially groundbreaking, but it could wait until morning. As Alan turned to leave, a low hum vibrated through the ship. At first, he thought it was the engines, but the sound grew louder, more alien. The air around him wavered like heat rising from asphalt. He grabbed the railing to steady himself as a blue-white light burst from above, bathing the deck in unnatural brightness. "Hello," he called out, squinting upward. "Is someone there?" His words seemed to hang in the suddenly thick air. The light intensified, and Alan felt his feet leave the deck. Panic surged through him as he realized he was floating. He flailed his arms, desperately reaching for anything to hold on to, but the ship grew smaller beneath him. His last conscious thought was of the research he'd never get to finish before darkness claimed him. He woke to a sterile white ceiling. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something not of Earth. Alan sat up slowly, his head pounding. He was on a narrow bed in a small hexagonal room with no visible door. The walls glowed with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from within the material itself. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice sounding strange in the room that absorbed all echo. As if in response, a seam appeared in one wall, widening to reveal a corridor beyond. Two figures entered, and Alan's breath caught in his throat. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with gray skin that shimmered with an iridescent quality. Their large oval eyes were completely black, and they had no visible nose, just 2 small slits. Their mouths were mere lines across their lower faces. "Human Alan Walsh," one of them said, the words forming in Alan's mind rather than in his ears. "You are aboard the Nexus vessel of the Ziraxian Collective." Alan backed against the wall, his heart hammering. "You're aliens? This is a spaceship." "We are Ziraxians," the second one communicated. "I am Elior, Chief Archivist. This is Varen, Specimen Coordinator." "Specimen." Alan swallowed hard. "I'm a specimen. All sentient beings we collect are specimens for our archive," Elior explained. "Your species is of particular interest. You are primitive yet surprisingly adaptive." Alan's scientific mind began to process the situation despite his fear. "You've been studying humans." "For many cycles," Varen confirmed. "You are the 67th human in our collection." "Collection?" Alan's stomach churned. "There are others like me here." Elior moved to the wall, waved a 6-fingered hand, and the surface became transparent. Alan gasped as he saw a long corridor with dozens of similar cells. Some contained beings that looked vaguely humanoid, while others housed creatures he couldn't begin to comprehend. The Universal Archive houses samples from 4,237 sentient species, Elior explained with what seemed like pride. "You will contribute your knowledge and biological data to our understanding." "I want to go home," Alan said firmly, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "That is not possible," Varen stated simply. "But you will be comfortable and well treated. Come, we will show you the facility." With no choice, Alan followed them through the opening. As they walked, he noticed subtle movements in the other cells. Eyes, or what he assumed were eyes, followed his progress. One cell contained a being that looked almost human, a woman with dark hair who pressed her palm against the transparent wall as he passed. "Who is that?" Alan asked. "Specimen Kira Bennett, acquired 6 lunar cycles ago," Varen answered. "Another human." Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Alan knew he wasn't alone. Somehow, that made everything both better and worse. Better because he wasn't the only human here. Worse because it meant his abduction wasn't a mistake they might correct. As they led him deeper into the ship, Alan's mind raced. He was a scientist now on the other side of the microscope, and somehow he needed to find a way back home. Alan followed the Ziraxians through winding corridors that seemed to stretch for miles. The ship was massive, like a floating city in space. Other aliens moved past them, some resembling the Ziraxians, others wildly different. Creatures with multiple limbs, translucent skin, or bodies that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. This vessel contains the sum of knowledge from across the known galaxy, Elior explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with glowing columns of light. The archive is our greatest achievement. Alan stared in wonder. The columns pulsed with data, images flickering within them, strange planets, unfamiliar stars, and creatures beyond imagination. "Why am I here?" Alan asked. "What do you want from me?" "Knowledge," Verand replied simply. "Each species offers unique perspectives. Humans are particularly interesting, biologically simple yet cognitively complex." Alan bristled at being called biologically simple, but remained silent as they led him to a small platform. Elior waved a hand, and a beam of light scanned Alan from head to toe. "Your neural patterns have been recorded," Elior said. "You will be assigned research duties based on your expertise. Marine biology, correct?" "Yes," Alan answered, surprised. "How did you know?" "We have been monitoring your species for generations. We know a great deal about you, Alan Walsh." The thought was unsettling. Alan's eyes wandered to the endless rows of data columns. "If I'm going to be here, I want to learn. About you. About all of this." Elior seemed pleased. "Curiosity. This is why humans are valuable specimens. You will be granted limited access to non-restricted sections of the archive." They showed him to a small workstation where information flowed across translucent screens. Alan quickly learned how to navigate the system, his fingers moving through the alien interface as if manipulating water. "The Universal Protocol is our most sacred rule," Elior explained, bringing up a complex diagram. "All advanced civilizations adhere to it. No technology may be shared with developing species until they independently achieve interstellar travel." "Why?" Alan asked. "History is filled with extinct civilizations that advanced too quickly," Verand said. "They destroyed themselves with technology they weren't mature enough to handle." Days passed as Alan explored the archive, always under supervision. He learned about countless alien cultures, star systems, and scientific principles beyond Earth's understanding. But access to the most advanced technologies was always blocked, with the same message appearing: restricted by Universal Protocol. One morning, or what passed for morning on the ship, Alan was returning to his cell when he spotted Kira Bennett in a nearby research area. She glanced up, her dark eyes meeting his, then subtly motioned for him to come closer. "They're watching us less now," she whispered when he approached. "I've been here 6 months. They think I'm compliant." "You're not," Alan guessed. Kira smiled thinly. "They're hypocrites. They claim the protocol protects developing species, but they abduct us, study us like lab rats. Everything they do violates the spirit of their own law." "Have you found a way out?" Alan asked. "Not yet, but I've discovered something." She lowered her voice further. "The Ziraxians aren't just observing. They're harvesting knowledge from every species, keeping it for themselves. They control who advances and who doesn't." Alan frowned. "What can we do?" "Access the restricted sections. I've been mapping security patterns. There are gaps." Kira quickly showed him a series of commands on her workstation. "Try these when no one's watching. You'll see what they're hiding." A chime sounded, signaling the end of the research period. As Ziraxian guards approached, Kira whispered one last thing. "What they fear most is us learning what they know. That's why we have to do exactly that." That night, alone in his cell, Alan stared at the ceiling, thinking about Earth, so distant now, and the knowledge that might help humanity if he could somehow bring it back. Despite everything, a small spark of hope had ignited. If the Ziraxians feared human potential enough to hide knowledge from them, perhaps that same potential could be their ticket home. Alan waited 3 days before attempting to access the restricted sections. He'd noticed the Ziraxian guards followed predictable patterns. Every 14 hours, there was a 5-minute window when supervision in his research area was minimal. When that moment came, his heart pounding, Alan quickly entered the commands Kira had shown him. The screen flickered, then displayed an entirely new interface with countless folders labeled in alien script. Thanks to his time exploring the archive, he could now read enough to navigate the basics. Amazing, he whispered, scanning through categories of knowledge. One section seemed to contain information about propulsion systems, faster-than-light travel methods that humans had only theorized about. Another held details on gravity manipulation, while a third explained energy generation from what appeared to be quantum vacuum fluctuations. Alan absorbed as much as he could, his scientist's mind cataloging and organizing the information. He didn't understand everything, but he grasped enough to realize how revolutionary this knowledge would be on Earth. A soft chime warned him of approaching guards. Alan quickly closed the restricted access and returned to his authorized research just as Varin entered. "You are making good progress, Alan Walsh," the alien remarked, examining his workstation. "There's so much to learn," Alan replied carefully. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." Later that cycle, Alan spotted Kira in the dining area. They managed to sit together, pretending casual conversation, while quietly discussing what Alan had discovered. "We need to memorize as much as possible," Kira whispered. "The physics principles are what matter most. If we ever get back to Earth, we don't need their exact technology, just the underlying science." "If we get back," Alan emphasized. "How do we even begin to plan an escape from a ship this size, in the middle of space?" "I'm working on that. But first, we need an ally." Kira nodded subtly toward a creature across the room. Unlike the tall, humanoid Ziraxians, this being resembled a large octopus, with mottled blue-green skin and multiple tentacle-like limbs. Its large, expressive eyes seemed to be watching them. "That's Grivax," Kira explained, "from a water planet called Nexeri. The Ziraxians took him 3 years ago. He has access to maintenance systems. He understands their technology better than any other captive. Can we trust him?" The Ziraxians destroyed his homeworld's ecosystem with mining operations. He has more reason to hate them than we do. Over the next few weeks, Alan continued his secret explorations of the restricted archives. He learned that the Ziraxians weren't merely enforcing the universal protocol. They were weaponizing it. By keeping certain species technologically stunted while advancing others, they maintained control over vast regions of space. During one research session, Alan discovered something truly shocking: records of Ziraxian visits to Earth dating back thousands of years. They had been studying humans since the dawn of civilization, occasionally taking specimens, always watching humanity's progress. "They'd been manipulating us all along," he told Kira during one of their brief meetings. "Sometimes hindering our development, sometimes nudging us forward, always according to their agenda." Grivax joined their conspiracy, communicating through a translation device. His multiple limbs proved invaluable for quickly accessing multiple systems simultaneously without detection. "Ziraxians fear human potential," Grivax explained, his words appearing as text on the small device. "Your species adapts quickly, thinks creatively. Most species follow predictable development patterns. Humans do not." Ellen spent every available moment memorizing crucial scientific principles. FTL travel required understanding how to create and manipulate what the Ziraxians called fold space. Energy generation involved tapping into vacuum energy at the quantum level. Gravity control came from manipulating particles he had no name for on Earth. As he absorbed this forbidden knowledge, Alan realized he wasn't just breaking the universal protocol. If he succeeded in bringing this information back to Earth, he would be changing the course of human history forever. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "We need to move soon," Kira told him one day. "I've heard the guards talking. We're approaching a planetary outpost. If we're going to escape, that will be our chance." Alan, Kira, and Grivax huddled in a rarely used maintenance corridor, speaking in hushed tones. According to Grivax, the Xeraxian vessel would dock at Outpost Kilari in just 2 days. This planetary station served as a supply and transfer point for archive specimens and materials. The security protocols changed during docking, Grivax explained through his translation device. Many systems must temporarily disconnect and reconnect. This creates vulnerabilities. Kira nodded, her face serious. "I've been studying the ship layouts. There's a bay of scout vessels near the lower docking ring. They're small, fast, and equipped with basic navigation systems. Can any of us fly one?" Alan asked. "I can." Grivax's tentacles moved excitedly. "My species navigates 3-dimensional space instinctively. Xeraxian controls are simple compared to oceanic currents." Alan ran a hand through his hair, which had grown longer during his captivity. "Even if we get to a ship, where would we go? We're countless light years from Earth." Kira pulled out a small device she had modified from standard Xeraxian technology. "I've been accessing the navigation database. I've memorized Earth's coordinates in their system." She paused. "Alan, I need to tell you something. I wasn't taken from Earth like you were." "What do you mean?" "I was on a classified deep space mission. Humans have ventured further than the public knows. The Xeraxians found our ship near Saturn and took me. That's why I've been so determined to get this technology. Our people have already begun the journey to the stars." Alan stared at her, processing this revelation. "All this time, I thought. I couldn't tell you earlier. I needed to be sure I could trust you completely." She placed a hand on his arm. "Now I am." They spent hours finalizing their plan. Grivax would create a system malfunction in the environmental controls, serious enough to distract security but not dangerous enough to trigger a full lockdown. During the confusion, they would make their way to the scout bay, secure a vessel, and launch before the Xeraxians realized what was happening. That night, alone in his cell, Alan couldn't sleep. He paced back and forth, wrestling with the moral implications of what he was about to do. By bringing advanced knowledge back to Earth, he would be violating the Universal Protocol, the very rule the Xeraxians claimed protected developing species from self-destruction. "But they've been manipulating us all along," he whispered to himself. "They've taken our people, studied us like animals, all while pretending to be protectors." Still, doubt gnawed at him. What if the protocol existed for good reason? What if humanity wasn't ready for faster-than-light travel or unlimited energy? What if he was about to hand a loaded gun to a child? The next morning, Kira sensed his hesitation. Having second thoughts, she asked as they pretended to work at their research stations. "I'm just wondering if we're doing the right thing," Alan admitted. "This knowledge could transform our world, but it could also destroy it." "That's not for the Xeraxians to decide," Kira argued. "Every species has the right to chart its own course. Besides, we don't have to share everything at once. We can be selective, careful about what technologies we introduce and when." Grivax joined the conversation through his translator. "My people were not given choice. Xeraxians decided our fate. Result: my world suffers, ecosystem dies. Choice is fundamental right." Elen nodded slowly. "You're right. If humanity makes mistakes with this knowledge, they'll be our mistakes, not decisions imposed by another species that thinks they know what's best for us." As the ship began its approach to Outpost Kilari, the three finalized their preparations. Grivax provided small devices to disable the tracking systems in their cells. Kira memorized the route to the scout bay. Alan focused on committing as much crucial scientific information to memory as possible. "Tomorrow," Kira whispered as they parted ways. "Freedom or failure. Either way." Alan replied. We choose our own path. Alan woke to the sound of alarms, not the usual soft chimes of the ship, but harsh, pulsing tones that echoed through the corridors. He jumped up, instantly alert. This wasn't part of their plan. Something had gone wrong. The transparent wall of his cell flickered, then went solid white before disappearing completely. The power was fluctuating throughout the ship. Gravax had created a more significant disturbance than planned. Alan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the small device Gravax had given him and slipped into the corridor. Other cells were opening too. Confused specimens of various species stumbled out, looking around in bewilderment. The chaos was perfect cover. Alan. Kira appeared from an adjacent hallway, her face flushed with urgency. We need to move now. Gravax triggered the environmental systems early. The Zeraxians detected his tampering. They ran through the confusion, dodging other captives, and the occasional Zeraxian guard too preoccupied with containing the spreading chaos to notice them. The ship shuddered as it docked with Outpost Kilari, the massive structure visible through viewport windows as they passed. Where's Gravax? Alan asked as they descended toward the lower levels. He said he'd meet us at the scout bay, Kira replied, her breath coming fast. He had to finish disabling the tracking systems. They reached a massive door marked with Zeraxian symbols for small vessel storage. Kira placed her hand on the access panel, using a technique she'd observed countless times. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with dozens of sleek, oval-shaped craft. There, Kira pointed to a smaller ship near the exit bay. That's our best chance. It's designed for speed and stealth. As they rushed toward it, a tentacle reached out from behind a nearby vessel. Gravax emerged, his usually blue-green skin now pale and mottled. Hurt, his translator device displayed. Guards discovered. Escaped barely. One of his tentacles was severed at the tip, a viscous fluid leaking from the wound. Despite his injury, Gravax moved quickly to the scout ship and began activating its systems with his remaining healthy limbs. Can you still pilot it? Alan asked worriedly. Yes. Different now. Need help with manual controls. The ship's entry hatch opened with a soft hiss. They climbed inside, finding a compact but efficient cabin with 3 pilot seats surrounded by glowing controls and holographic displays. Gravax settled into the central position, his tentacles spreading across multiple interfaces. Alan and Kira took the side seats, following Gravax's instructions to activate specific systems. The bay doors. Kira pointed to the massive closed exit ahead of them. They're sealed during docking procedures. Gravax's translator flashed. Override possible. Need distraction. Alan spotted a control panel on his right. What about the other ships? Can we launch them too? Gravax's eyes brightened. Yes. Remote activation. With quick movements, Gravax guided Alan through a sequence of commands. Suddenly, engines fired up throughout the bay as dozens of scout ships came to life, their systems activating in a cascade of lights and sounds. Now, Gravax commanded, and they pushed the launch sequence for their own vessel. Their ship rose smoothly, hovering above the floor as chaos erupted around them. The bay's automated systems, detecting multiple launch preparations, began the emergency protocol to open the exit doors. Just as the massive doors began to part, Zeraxian security forces burst into the bay, their weapons drawn. Energy beams sliced through the air, striking several of the decoy ships. Hold on. Gravax's tentacles flew across the controls as their ship shot forward, barely squeezing through the partially opened bay doors. They emerged into space, the vast expanse of stars surrounding them. The outpost loomed nearby, its docking rings filled with vessels of various sizes. Alarms blared as pursuit ships began to launch. Gravax piloted with incredible skill, weaving through docking structures and support beams, using the outpost itself as cover. We need to jump to light speed now, Kira shouted, inputting Earth's coordinates into the navigation system. A massive explosion rocked their ship as a Ziraxian beam grazed their hull. Systems flickered, and a barrier suddenly materialized between the front and rear of the cabin. No. Ellen lunged forward, but too late. The security field had activated, separating him from Kira. Worse, a secondary explosion tore through the rear compartment where she sat. Ellen. Kira's voice came through the intercom. The jump drive is damaged. You have to go without me. I won't leave you. Ellen shouted. You must. Her voice crackled with static. I'll eject in the escape pod. Take the knowledge home. Ellen stared at the jump drive controls in horror as the stars stretched around them. Kira was gone, sacrificing herself so they could escape. His hand shook as he turned to Grivax. We have to go back for her, he pleaded. Grivax's translator flashed. Cannot. Ship damaged. Return means capture. The reality of their situation sank in. The scout ship's systems were failing. Warning lights flashed across control panels, and the sound of escaping air hissed from somewhere in the rear compartment. Earth's coordinates were locked in, but it was clear they wouldn't make it all the way. Emergency landing inevitable, Grivax explained, his tentacles working frantically across the controls. Must find habitable world in range. Days blurred together as they limped through space, making short jumps when the drive cooled enough to function. Ellen learned more about piloting from Grivax, while continuing to recite the scientific knowledge he'd memorized to keep it fresh in his mind. Your planet next jump, Grivax announced one day. Cannot achieve stable orbit. Will crash. Ellen nodded grimly. Can you aim for a remote area? Somewhere with low population. As Earth grew larger in their view screen, Ellen felt a surge of emotion. Home, but not as he planned to return. The ship shuddered violently as they entered the atmosphere, metal panels tearing away from the hull. Thank you, Grivax, Ellen said as the ground rushed up to meet them. For everything. The crash was violent but survivable. The scout ship plowed into a dense forest, carving a half-mile trench before coming to rest in a small clearing. When Ellen regained consciousness, smoke filled the cabin. He pulled himself free of the wreckage and dragged Grivax out just before flames engulfed the ship. Where? Grivax asked weakly, his translator barely functioning. Wyoming, I think, Ellen replied, looking at the pine-covered mountains surrounding them. Remote wilderness. We're lucky. Grivax didn't survive the night. His alien physiology couldn't adapt to Earth's conditions, and his injuries were too severe. Ellen buried him beneath a tall pine tree, marking the spot with stones arranged in the pattern of Grivax's home constellation. I'll make sure your sacrifice means something, Ellen promised. For 3 days, Ellen hiked through the wilderness, avoiding the helicopters and search planes that occasionally passed overhead. News reports he glimpsed on a diner television told of a meteorite impact in Bridger-Teton National Forest. The government was already covering up the crash. Ellen knew he couldn't trust official channels with what he knew. The technology he'd memorized could transform humanity, but in the wrong hands, it could be weaponized or suppressed. He needed allies, scientifically minded people who would understand the importance of careful implementation. In a small library computer, he searched for nearby research facilities and found his answer. The Hammond Quantum Research Center, just 60 miles away. Among its staff was Dr. Eleanor Wright, a physicist whose papers on theoretical faster-than-light travel had caused controversy in the scientific community. Ellen approached the facility after dark, avoiding security cameras and patrols. He left a note with specific quantum equations, ones that would make sense only to someone who understood the theoretical framework of FTL travel. The next evening, he returned to find Dr. Wright waiting alone by a side entrance. You wrote these equations, she said simply, holding up his note. No one on Earth could have derived them yet. Who are you? My name is Alan Walsh. I was a marine biologist before the Ziraxians took me. Her eyes widened. Ziraxians. I have knowledge that could change everything, Alan said. But I need help. They're coming for me. Dr. Wright studied him for a long moment. How do you know they're coming? Alan pointed to the night sky. Because I broke their biggest rule, and they've never let anyone get away with that. As if in response, a faint light appeared in the sky, moving too fast and too deliberately to be a plane or satellite. We don't have much time, Alan said urgently. Will you help me? Dr. Wright looked from the light back to Alan. Come inside. Quickly. As the door closed behind them, Alan knew the real challenge was just beginning. He had broken the universe's biggest rule. Now he had to deal with the consequences. Alan sat in Dr. Wright's cluttered office, surrounded by whiteboards filled with equations. For 3 weeks, they had worked tirelessly, translating his alien knowledge into terms Earth scientists could understand. A small team of trusted researchers had joined them, sworn to secrecy. The energy generation principles alone could end fossil fuel dependence within a decade, Dr. Wright said, studying the simulation on her computer. But the anti-gravity applications, that's what worries me. The military implications are enormous. Alan nodded grimly. That's why we're being selective. Clean energy first. Medical applications second. Transportation third. Weapons technology never. Their work had not gone unnoticed. Twice they had relocated to avoid government agents. Strange electronic interference disrupted their communications regularly. Signs of Xeraxian scouts searching for the source of the leaked technology. Alan, a familiar voice called from the doorway. He turned, his heart stopping in his chest. Kira stood there, thinner than before, with a new scar across her cheek, but unmistakably alive. How? Was all he could manage. The escape pod worked, she explained, entering the room. I crashed in the Pacific. A fishing vessel picked me up. I've been looking for you ever since. Their reunion was brief but emotional. Kira had her own story to tell, of evading both human and alien pursuers, of making contact with her former colleagues in the classified space program, of piecing together Alan's trail. The Xeraxians are preparing an ultimatum, she warned. Their council has convened. They consider your actions a serious breach of the protocol. That night, as they transferred their research to a more secure facility, the first direct contact came. All electronic devices within a mile radius suddenly activated, screens displaying the same message: cease knowledge distribution. Final warning. They won't just ask nicely next time, Kira said, her face grim. In the archive, I saw records of planets quarantined for protocol violations. They use energy fields to prevent space travel, restrict global communications, sometimes even limit technological development. Alan faced a terrible choice: continue sharing the knowledge and risk Earth being cut off from the stars forever, or suppress the discoveries that could elevate humanity to new heights. What if there's a third option? Dr. Wright suggested. We share knowledge in carefully measured doses, prove that humans can handle advanced technology responsibly. They worked frantically to prepare a demonstration. Using principles Alan had memorized, they constructed a small device that generated clean energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, technology that could end energy scarcity without weaponization potential. 3 days later, a Xeraxian ship descended openly, hovering above the research facility. Rather than hiding, Alan walked outside to face them, the energy device in his hands. A beam of light shot down, and within it materialized a familiar figure, Elior, the chief archivist. Alan Walsh, the alien, communicated directly to his mind. You have violated the most sacred law of galactic civilization. The Council demands all technology be surrendered and knowledge suppressed. Alan stood his ground. Your protocol isn't about protection. It's about control. You decide which species advance and which don't. That's not your right. Uncontrolled technological advancement leads to destruction, Elior insisted. We have seen it countless times. Then help us instead of threatening us. Alan countered. This device provides clean energy without environmental damage. We designed it to be impossible to weaponize. He placed it on the ground between them. Humanity is ready for guided advancement, not quarantine. Ilir studied the device, then Alan. Your proposition is unprecedented. So is your situation, Kira said, stepping forward. We're not the only humans who know about you now. Quarantine us, and you make an enemy. Guide us, and you gain an ally. For long moments, Ilir was silent, communicating with the ship above. Finally, he responded. The Council will consider a new category of relationship, provisional technological exchange under supervision. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. In breaking the universe's biggest rule, Alan had forced the Ziraxians to bend their own rigid system. Earth would advance, but gradually and with guidance. As Ilir's ship departed, Alan looked up at the stars, now filled with new meaning. Humanity's path to the cosmos would be neither completely free nor entirely controlled. They would walk a middle road, one that Alan had carved out by daring to bring knowledge home. What now? Kira asked, standing beside him. Alan smiled. Now we build a future worth exploring, one step at a time.